name is Benjamin Drevlow. This is a poem called In Praise of Point Break in 15 Parts. Gary Busey says, "Surf's up, Ace." He says, "Welcome to SeaWorld, kid." He says, "Just ask stoned and ask questions." Gary Busey has been a cop in LA for 22 years, and in those 22 years, two big things have changed. The air got dirty and the sex got clean. Drum roll, please. During his 22 years in the line of duty, Gary Busey has fired his gun 19 times. And yet, he has no idea what a blind man fetching a brick from the bottom of a pool has to do with being a DEA agent. Gary Busey says, "Listen, you little shit. I was taking shrapnel at Quezon when you were crapping in your hands and rubbing it on your face." He says, "When I started at the Bureau, you were still popping zits on your funny face and jacking off to the lingerie section of Sears catalog." He says, "Last time you had a feeling I had to kill a guy, and I hate that. It looks bad on my report." He says, "Speak into the microphone, squid brain." Gary Busey is hungry. How hungry is Gary Busey? He is so hungry that he could eat the ass end out of a dead rhino. And then Gary Busey proceeds to eat two meatball hoagies while a group of surfers turned bank robbers he's staking out. They proceed to rob the bank across the street from him. How does Gary Busey know that the bank robbers who dress up like dead presidents are actually surfer punks in disguise? "Freeze that for me," he says while watching the video. He points at an on-screen shot of LBJ mooning the security cameras after the dead presidents robbed their 30th bank in 3 years. "It's the tan lines," he says. "Just look at those tan lines." It's that and the fact that trace evidence from one of the robberies has been identified as sex wax, which Gary Busey says and then demonstrates how to apply sex wax to a surfboard. And, the fact that they only rob banks in the summer. Gary Busey says, when summer's over, they vanish like a virgin on prom night. "Swish," he says, with a flick of the wrist and sound effect for virgins vanishing on prom nights. "Forget about it, kid," Gary Busey warns. "They're ghosts." To borrow a line from another wry old LA detective, Gary Busey is too old for this shit. Section 2. Fact. Point Break is the only crime thrill in the history of cinema, nay, the history of the world, ever to hinge on the identification of tan lines from a bank robber and an LBJ mask mooning the camera. It's like Chekhov says, if there's going to be a bank robber mooning a camera at the beginning, then there needs to be a surfer dude mooning the camera at the end. When Gary Busey's character realizes that the surfer guy has the same tan lines as the bank robber from the beginning, he jumps up on an office desk and hangs 10, dude. The bare butt in question belongs to Grommet. Grommet is surfer slang for a young punk. It is believed to go back to the Portuguese word grommet, which refers to the lowest ranking sailors on a ship. In many ways, you could say that Johnny Utah could be considered his own kind of FBI undercover surfer Grommet. Eat your heart out, Chekhov. Number 3. The problem with young punks slash grommets like Johnny Utah can be summed up thusly. You know nothing. In fact, you know less than nothing. If you even knew that you knew nothing, that would be something, but you don't. And also, thusly, you're a real blue flame special, aren't you, son? Young, dumb, and full of cum. With blue flame special being cop slang for a young hotshot. There's some debate as to whether it refers to blue outer portion of an open flame which burns the hottest, hence the hot spot, or the intestinal gases said to light up when released from the body and touched by the flame of a match, or a bastardized combination of blue plate special, aka discounted meal, and the practice of blue flaming, aka lying on your back with your legs splayed and lighting your heart on fire. That should be fart on fire. Take your pick. Number 4. Keanu Reeves' character supposedly is an ex-Rose Bowl winning Ohio State quarterback named Johnny Utah. It takes a while to figure out if this is his actual character's name or a nickname or his undercover code name. It is his actual name, which he also goes by when he is undercover. The screenwriters apparently liked his name so much they originally named the movie Johnny Utah before finally setting on Point Break, which actually sounds like a surfing movie and not a spaghetti western with a snappy theme song. At one point, Johnny Utah introduces himself to his future love interest, shouting, "Hey, I'm Johnny Utah." And then his future love interest yells, "Who cares?" over her shoulder and surfs away. His future love interest being Lori Petty, playing a female character named Tyler, who has the same haircut as Keanu slash Johnny. At one point, Keanu slash Johnny tells Lori Petty slash Tyler, "Fuck, why can't I even say what I mean?" And Lori Petty Tyler says, "Shh," and puts her finger to his lips. "You don't have to." And they have sex on the beach and get all the sand in their naughty parts. 5. It's worth noting that Keanu Reeves, Mr. Future John Wick, gets his ass kicked in every fight scene in the movie, including the scene where they raid the drug house of Nazi surfers Warchild and Tone, Tone played by Anthony Kiedis of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, wherein a random naked chick comes out of the shower, throws Keanu Johnny back into a mirror, knees him in the groin, and pummels him to the ground. This is the only instance of female nudity in the movie. It is also the scene where Tone, aka Anthony Kiedis, literally shoots himself in the foot. Of the many things that director Catherine Bigelow brings to the movie, subtly is not one of them. 6. Catherine Bigelow's portrayal of male characters in Point Break is the peak of female gaze movies. Someone wrote that somewhere in an article I read, I swear, which is cool and true, but it's also not the peak of gay gays. You might even call it the peak Swayze gays. Sadly, despite the plot revolving around the tan lines of hot tot surfer ass, we never see Swayze's hot tot surfer ass. Nor, for that matter, do we see Keanu Reeves not quite as hot, yet still tot undercover FBI agent posing as surfer ass. Number 7. Patrick Swayze's character is called Bodhi, which Lori Petty explains is short for Bodhisattva, which IMDb explains is a term for the Buddhist religion meaning an enlightened being who, out of compassion, foregoes nirvana in order to save others. As Bodhi, the enlightened surfer slash bank robber, Patrick Swayze says things like, "Yo, riding waves is a state of mind. It's that place where you lose yourself and find yourself. And it's not tragic to die doing what you love. And this was never about the money. This was about us against the system that kills the human spirit. We stand for something. We are here to show those guys that are inching their way on the freeway in their metal coffins that human spirit is still alive." And looking at his watch, "Yo, Lil Hand says it's time to rock and roll." 8. Keanu Reeves was not originally cast as Johnny Utah. They originally wanted the beautiful beefcake stud athlete Matthew Broderick of Ferris Bueller fame. Just imagine the female gaze on those tan lines. 9. When Johnny finally catches Bodhi robbing a bank dressed up as Ronald Reagan, a chase scene ensues that seems to be a shot-for-shot remake of the chase scene from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, where Ferris runs through people's houses, jumps fences and backyards to beat his principal home. Much like getting stoned while watching The Wizard of Oz to the soundtrack of Dark Side of the Moon, it's fun to imagine the vaguely African-sounding bongos and car horns of the soundtrack to Ferris Bueller's Day Off, while watching Johnny chase Bodhi until he re-injures his bad knee and unloads every bullet in his clip in the air out of frustration because Johnny Utah just can't bring himself to kill Bodhi. The African-sounding bongos and car horns song from Ferris Bueller's Day Off is called March to the Swivelheads by the English Beat. So far as I know, there is no name for the song playing during Point Break. It is mostly just nondescript tom-tom drums with a synthy 80s keyboard. I know this because I used to have one of those keyboards when my parents still thought I could be a musician when I grew up. I am not a musician. 10. But before Johnny unloads his clip and lets Bodie get away, first there's a scene in which Bodie picks up a snarling pit bull and throws it at Johnny, who then drop kicks said snarling pit bull. According to IMDb, though, no dogs were injured during the filming of this movie. They rehearsed it with the animal trainer gently tossing the dog to Keanu over 10 times from just a foot away. According to IMDb, the dog that Keanu then drop kicks is a fake. 11. Bodie tells Johnny it's basic dog psychology. He kidnaps him and takes Lori Petty Tyler hostage. He says if you scare them and get them peeing down their leg, they submit. But if you project weakness, that promotes violence, and that's how people get hurt. Patrick Swayze asks Keanu, why be a servant to the law when you can be its master? Then he robs a bank, and he robs another bank, and jumps out of a plane, then jumps out of a second plane, then threatens to kill Lori Petty, then threatens to kill Keanu Reeves. 12. Asked on a Japanese talk show what the theme of the movie was, Reeves says, I guess it's the breakdown and reconstruction of man and a belief system, and also the discovery of himself. Added Swayze, it makes a statement about our society in the United States of giving up on yourself and becoming part of a system rather than staying an individual. 13. In the final act, there are not one but two scenes where they jump out of planes in an attempt to scare off / kill Johnny. Before they jump the first time, Johnny says, we gonna jump or jerk off? During the fall, Bodie and Johnny hold hands and play a game of chicken to see who will pull their parachute first as they careen closer and closer to death. Bodie says to Johnny, 90 seconds and we're meat waffles. Johnny refuses to pull the cord. Bodie to Johnny, pull the cord. Johnny, after you, Alphonse, I insist. This is a reference to a comic strip, Alphonse and Gaston, from early 1900s Frederick Burr Upper, about two overly polite French gentlemen who can never do anything without insisting that the other do it first, which distracts from the larger point. While parachuting, in real life, they would not be able to hear each other over the wind whipping in their faces. I saw it on the show Mythbusters, which actually points to something larger and more important. The mythos of Point Break in our larger public consciousness, just like Paul Bunyan or John Henry or Jesus. 14. Let's be honest with ourselves. It's kind of fucked up when Johnny gets Angelo Pappas killed while protecting Bodie. If for no other reason than Garrett Busey was taking shrapnel and K-Song when Johnny was crapping in his own hands and rubbing it on his face. 15. In the final scene, we find Johnny and Bodie a year later, both a year later in the actual film and later in the film itself. Keanu with his hair grown out for his role in Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. Swayze's with his hair cut short for reasons unprovided on IMDb.com. Johnny's tracked him down after going to every city in Mexico and finally caught up with him at Bells Beach, Victoria, just in time for the mythical 50-year storm that Bodie has been waiting for his whole life. Johnny throws down the Ronald Reagan mask at his feet and tells him he's looked for him in every city in Mexico as well as every other random exotic place. In an Oscar-winning performance, Johnny tells him, you gotta go down. You crossed the line. People trusted you. They died. To which Bodie responds, still serving? Yano says, every day, after which the final fight ensues. Johnny getting his ass kicked one last time, but just when we think Bodie has choked him to death / drowned him and thus escaped the law once more, it turns out that Johnny has learned from his many ass kickings and has stealthily handcuffed him to Bodie from underwater. Bodie, you know I can't handle a cage, man. Johnny, I don't care. You gotta go down. It's gotta be that way. Bodie, okay, okay, I'm screwed. I'm gonna go to jail. I'm gonna pay. Johnny Utah gets his guy. Good for you. That's good. Gonna be a big hero. But look at it. Look at it. He says, looking at the big 50-foot wave crashing down. Johnny looks at it. Bodie, just let me get one wave before you take me. My whole life has been about this moment. Come on, compadre. Come on. Come on. Johnny, looking back at Victoria police and various FBI agents coming down the stairs to the beach, he looks back at the 50-foot wave, nods, then nods again, the rain pouring down, soaking his Bill and Ted hair to his face. He holds up the key to the cuffs. He uncuffs Bodie. Vaya con Dios, he says, which translates to, go with God. Johnny watching Bodie paddle out to the 50-foot waves. What the fuck, Utah? The Victorian cops shout in a vaguely Australian accent as they rush toward the water. You let him go. Johnny, no, I didn't. Victorian cops, we'll get him when he comes back. Johnny, walking away, tossing his badge in the water. He's not coming back. If the droning FBI badge had voice over dialogue, it would be saying, and neither is Johnny Utah. Wherein begins the modern day mythos of the great moral battle between surfer and man, bank robber and bank robber stopper, grommet and surf sensei, id and ego, bro versus bro, Ronald Reagan versus the FBI, which really should have won an Oscar for something, if for nothing else than for hair and makeup.